Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to be continuing The Coming Storm. Um, so let's just dive right into it. Chapter 3. 3 days later, several hours after the sun had already set, Arabella was scowling and pacing. Sometimes she would stop to glare angrily at the roiling sky and impatiently tap her foot. It should have been so easy. An idiot could have followed her directions. The rain hadn't stopped since the night she'd met Jack. The tiny shack on Salty Cove where she was waiting for him leaked worse than her father's tavern, which was really saying something. She chose to move outside, under the eaves, near where their boat was docked. She had lit 3 torches to guide them through the stormy night. The boat was a tiny thing, little more than a fancy fishing vessel. The name Barnacle was painted gaudily across the stern, but she was seaworthy, and the sails looked in good shape. And far more important, she really did seem to be abandoned. Where is he? Arabella wondered with increasing frustration. Then there was a loud crash in the scrub at the head of the cove. Arabella put her hand on her dagger she had hidden in her pocket. My lady, Jack came falling out of the woods, not at all on the trail Arabella had mapped out, and staggered forward across onto the tiny beach. He bowed dramatically. I am here. Let us sail and let the adventure begin. His shirt was torn at the sleeve and his hair was a mess. There was something that looked suspiciously like blood on his trousers. Mr. Sparrow, Arabella breathed, trying not to show her relief, you're hours late. What happened? I thought I gave you specific instructions. Yes, well, he half hid his mouth by scratching at his nose and looked away so she couldn't see his eyes. A number of obstacles, flotsam, jetsam, really. Nothing important. But I'm here, aren't I? You've been in a fight, Arabella sighed, taking his hand and pulling it away from his face. A straight, deep cut went from his cheekbone almost to his mouth. I found my sack, Jack admitted, holding it up happily. And though you may not believe this is to be possible, being as it was in hands as capable as my own, the map was, well, it was misplaced. You lost the map, Arabella scolded. Then how on earth did you find me? There are a number of ways to reach a desired destination, lassie. Arabella shook her head grimly and kicked her muddy pile of bags against the barrel she'd rolled up all the way over here. It had taken most of her spare time to sneak what they needed away from the tavern. She scowled at Jack, who repositioned his newly found sack on his shoulder. The point is, I'm here, tide's rising. Mustn't waste time, shall we, lassie? Jack asked, extending his arm towards the boat. Call me lassie again, and you'll be drinking up the tide, Arabella grumbled under her breath as they began to load up the barnacle. Halt, a sudden voice rang out. Jack slumped inside. Oh, now what? I'm coming with you, the voice continued. Jack looked up, standing at the trailhead. 1 foot placed dramatically on a rock was a handsome, well-dressed young man. He was about the same age as Jack and Arabella, but that was where the similarities ended. He was tall and broad-shouldered. He wore an immaculate jacket and a pair of breeches that were perfectly cut to his figure. All his buttons were polished and an elegant sword hung from his belt. Jack took the other boy in with a sneer. Sorry, chap, he began. This boat is ready to set sail. The crew, meaning Belle here and myself, are no longer accepting passengers. Go home to the pleasant estate you came from and have a nice life. I am Fitzwilliam P. Dalton III, the young man said, ignoring Jack and striding forward. I don't care if you're Pope Dalton P. William VII, Jack said. I don't know what you're doing here, but we are very busy sailors with very important things to do. So if you don't mind, we'll just raise the sails, set our course, etc., all without you, and be on our way. He pressed his hands together and gave a mocking bow, then quickly turned on his heel towards the barnacle. Very busy, important sailors, Fitzwilliam said with badly hidden scorn. He carefully removed from his pocket a piece of cloth and delicately unfolded it. The map, Arabella whispered, recognizing it at once and glaring at Jack. Fitzwilliam haughtily read aloud. Meet Arabella at this spot at dusk in order to commandeer a boat, find Sword of Cortez, eliminate Captain Tourniquet, acquire the perfect hat, become captain, rule entire Caribbean, live happily ever after. Oh, Jack, Arabella said, clearly embarrassed. I suppose I have not arrived too late for the hat part, Fitzwilliam added, looking meaningfully at Jack's ragged hair. Yes, yes, so what? Jack said impatiently. So I have a life plan. What do you have? Well, besides a fancy silk suit that you seem to like to wear in pouring rain while wading through mud. Jack turned to Arabella and whispered. The pastimes of these aristos are so sick and odd, yet strangely intriguing. I've decided to accompany you, Fitzwilliam announced grandly, and produced his own kit bag. It was much nicer than anything Arabella or Jack had. New leather and probably full of nice, expensive things. Jack opened his mouth to protest, but Arabella silenced him. Why? She asked, intrigued. You're obviously wealthy and don't have the need we do for treasure. A man in your position can do anything he wants. You don't have to sneak away from your family or for adventure. At least not the way I do, you know. She glared at Jack, me being a lassie and all. Au contraire, my lady, Fitzwilliam bowed. As the eldest son of the Earl of Dalton, I am precisely bound by the same sort of family rules you are. Perhaps more so. We came from England less than a month ago when my father decided to expand his holdings into the New World. Since then, I've been forced to do nothing but attend balls and cotillions of other English families. Oh, sounds dreadful, Jack muttered. You have no idea, Fitzwilliam said with some heat. Regardless, I am expected to choose one of the English ladies I meet and marry her within the next year. I am forbidden from entering the naval service or pursuing any career other than what my father chooses for me, which is, namely, continuing the family Dalton, which means chaperoned walks with stupid rich girls, dinners with my family's friends, who are 3 times my age, and acres of banana trees. Sounds dreadful, Arabella echoed Jack. I'd take drunken old sailors over bunches of bananas any day. So, when I found this, it was a sign. Fitzwilliam held up the map. My escape, my destiny, my adventure. Your exit, Jack said quickly. The high seas are no place for a whelp-born fop like yourself. Run along now, Fitzy. Bye-bye. Oh, come on, Jack, you might be useful, Arabella whispered. You can afford supplies when we run out, and it would be handy to have another pair of strong arms aboard. You seem to be mad enough for the job at hand, Jack said. Thanks, Arabella said, I think. It matters not, Fitzwilliam interrupted. I am coming. No, you're not, Jack said. The three stood there quietly for a moment. The rain continued to pour around them. The wind rattled some of the rigging on the Barnacle. Fitzwilliam paused. Then, after a moment, he said, I challenge you to a duel. If I win, you let me come with you. I lose, I leave and tell no one what I have seen here, or anything of your plans. Oh, Fitzy, I would love to, Jack said, not really sounding regretful. But as it happens, I have yet to acquire the sword I really want. No sword, no duel, no boarding the ship for you. So sorry. Oh, that's not a problem, Arabella said, a mischievous look on her face. When I was cleaning out the boat, I found a half-dozen rapiers stored in a chest. She went over to the Barnacle and triumphantly pulled out a cheap, rusty old sword. She tossed it to Jack. Here you go. Thank you, my lady, Jack said through gritted teeth. He cut the sword easily and tested its weight. It wasn't very well made. Fitzwilliam pulled out his own weapon, a beautifully balanced rapier which made a clean swoosh in the air as he saluted his opponent. Show off, Jack muttered. Then they leapt forward. Their blades met with a loud clang, sparks scattered on the dark beach. There's a nifty little illustration for you guys. Jack's right there, and Fitzwilliams is on the other side. You can pause that if you want to look at it for some moment. There's some clouds in the background. Jack moved energetically forward and backward, lunging and dipping and posturing. Fitzwilliam barely moved at all, using short, quick swipes of his wrist to parry his opponent's attacks. When he did move in, it was with precise, swift, controlled footwork. This is going to be a massacre, Arabella said, feeling a little sorry for Jack. Fitzwilliam obviously had the advantage of years of training, probably from some great English arms master. The nobleman was almost a full head taller than Jack, and muscled where Jack was slender. Jack had no shortage of enthusiasm, however, and he was full of little tricks like leaping up on rocks and driftwood to avoid the tip of Fitzwilliam's sword. But all of his talents combined were no match for the would-be next Earl of Dalton. Grimacing in concentration, Fitzwilliam redoubled his attack. He lunged forward with all his strength. Jack avoided the worst blow by throwing himself to the ground and rolling backwards. But when he sat up, rapier in his hands, Fitzwilliam was already above him, his sword at Jack's throat. Yield, Fitzwilliam commanded, grinning in triumph. Jack frowned. For a moment it looked like he was going to refuse. He finally sighed and dropped his blade. All right, all right. You don't have to act all superior about it, he muttered. Ah, Fitzwilliam sheathed his rapier with a satisfying snick and put his hand out to help Jack up. A gracious loser as well as a busy and important sailor. I see I am blessed in the capabilities of my shipmates. Jack batted Fitzwilliam's hand away and leapt up by himself. Fitzy's quite annoying, eh? He whispered to Arabella. She didn't entirely disagree. Strong and capable, and handsome he might be, but Fitzwilliam P. Dalton III definitely also had the makings of a first-class snob. Well then, we're a team, Arabella said, putting her hand out. For the first time, Fitzwilliam looked unsure, taking her hand hesitantly. He'd probably never shaken hands with a woman before. Jack put his hand on top of the other two, grinning with sudden enthusiasm. To adventure, he toasted. To adventure, Arabella repeated, grinning. Yes, to adventure, Fitzwilliam said, slowly and seriously. And of course, Jack added, smiling, to treasure and freedom. Chapter 4. By the crew's third day at sea, a blinding sun shone brightly against the blue sky. The weather had steadily improved the farther they sailed from Tortuga. This should have been good news, but nothing moved under the sun's heat. The sea was as flat as glass. There were no ripples of fish, no movement of the sails, no breeze at all. It was very, very hot, and the Barnacle was in the middle of the sea with no landing in sight. The crew had only a little drinking water left, which might last one more day, if they rationed it very carefully. The crew sat wilted and unmoving on the deck. Fitzwilliam had even finally taken off his fine blue jacket, not very proper for a nobleman. Jack had no issues with modesty and opened his shirt as widely as he could. Fitzwilliam didn't bother hiding his disgust with this situation. It has been days now, he said. 2 of those days without a single wind or any idea of where we are. We know that, Fitz, Arabella said crossly. She had pinned up her hair to keep cool, but rivulets of sweat still ran down her neck. I thought you two were sailors, Arabella challenged. Well, I know I am, Jack protested. Arabella and Fitzwilliam just stared. Sailor, Jack continued, and so did the stairs. Of sorts, Jack finished, before quickly turning away. Well, what about you? Arabella said, throwing a compass at Fitzwilliam's chest. Oh, me father the Earl taught me all about reading maps and charts and latitudes and the rest, she said in a snooty, mocking tone. If we had a map, I could read it, Fitzwilliam growled. Oh yes, they are very easy to come by, those secret maps to pirate kingdoms, Jack said sarcastically. Or they would be if there really were a blasted pirate kingdom, he added under his breath, sneering at Arabella. And what's that supposed to mean? Arabella demanded. I told you I thought stone-eyed Isla Esqueletica was probably one of the smaller Leeward islands. I never claimed to know exactly where he landed. You sounded awfully sure back at the cove, Jack said sternly. Oh, hang the both of you. Arabella snared in a very unladylike way and turned her back on Jack and Fitzwilliam. Jack sighed. He turned off his bandana and mopped his face with it. As a gesture of goodwill, he offered it to Fitzwilliam, but the nobleman's son just gave him a look of disgust. Jack shrugged and put it back on, tugging in a stray bit of hair that the breeze kept blowing out of place. He stopped suddenly, realizing something. A breeze kept blowing his hair out of place. A breeze! He licked his finger and held it up, turning around to determine the breeze's source. He turned to the southeast, the direction of the very faint wind. Fitz, give me your glass, he demanded. Too hot and tired to argue. The other boy opened his kit and carefully pulled out his spyglass, a gift from his father, his most prized possession. It was made of what looked like brass and copper, but could just as well have been gold. It had lenses made in Holland by the finest craftsmen. Jack treated the small telescope far less gently, opening it up with a snap that made Fitzwilliam's flinch. Jack held the glass to his eye and looked to the south. What is it, Jack? Arabella asked, forgetting her anger. A wind, finally, he answered. Huzzah! Fitzwilliam exclaimed. Both Jack and Arabella stared at him dubiously. Fitzwilliam shifted uncomfortably. I believe I meant, yo ho ho, wind. Yar? He said, quite unnaturally, clearing his throat. In the distance, Jack could see a fast-moving gray curtain of showers. As he lowered the glass, the wind was already raising around them. And there's rain with it, too. Well, that is excellent news. We shall not die of thirst, then, Fitzwilliam said. Then the first clouds began to darken the skies overhead. No, we certainly will not die of thirst, Jack said, biting his lip. Eerie, sharp squawks suddenly sounded overhead. Jack looked up to see a flock of seagulls, pelicans, and other seabirds covering the darkening sky, fleeing the approaching storm. The crew was silent for a few minutes, watching both sea and sky churn before them. A light drizzle began, peppering the ocean with tiny ripples. The sky became gradually darker, as if some great lamp in the heavens were being turned down slowly. The unruly surf became more violent, carelessly tossing the ship about. "Where did it come from?" Arabella murmured. "I mean, it seems so strange. The sky, the sea. They were so still a moment ago." "Where it comes from does not matter," Jack said. "It's where it's going that should be of concern to us, especially as it seems headed directly for the mighty Barnacle." "Come now, it is probably no more than a squall," Fitzwilliam said, squinting to keep his eyes shielded from the increasingly heavy rain. If we are able to stay afloat, it shall be over in an hour or two. We shall get through this easily." As though in response, a tremendous crash of thunder, louder than any cannon fire the crew had ever heard, rocked the ship. Unimaginably long forks of lightning flashed all around them, and a huge, swelling wave swept over the ship, drenching the shipmates. "Help me grab the line," Jack ordered. "Reef the sails immediately." Here's another illustration of what kind of is happening right now, with all the rain hitting them. "Lower the sails, but we finally have a wind," Fitzwilliam protested. Jack stepped up to him. "Of course we have winds. How pleasant and how convenient for us. They'll just get caught in the sails and push us on our merry way towards Isla Esqueletica." His voice became sterner. "Or they'll tip this boat over like a child's toy. Savvy?" Fitzwilliam understood. The two boys lowered the sails and made the rigging fast. Arabella battened down the hatches as best as she could. Her almost encyclopedic knowledge of pirates, legends of the seas, and history contained almost nothing about the actual practice of sailing. She acted on instinct, tying up loose rope and other things on the dock, and went below to secure what few personal items they had lying around the sleeping quarters. Soon the storm was hitting them full force. Jack and Fitzwilliam had just tied down the lowermost sail and made the boom secure when the fierce storm delivered them a huge punch. Wind screamed around the rigging. The rain became a flood of water pouring from a pitch-black sky. Above, clouds roiled and swirled, mirroring the waves below. The Barnacle pitched wildly as Jack and Fitzwilliam tried to turn the boat to run with the storm. But even with Arabella adding her strength, the wheel spun out of control, and the rudder pulled away from them. Water poured over the deck in flash floods, so severe that the crew couldn't keep their footing. Three novice sailors were thrown from railing to railing as the Barnacle rocked in the storm. "It's no good," Fitzwilliam shouted. "The Barnacle is being tossed around like a toy." "Fitz, grab your axe. Help me take the mainmast down," Jack yelled. "You are mad," Fitzwilliam shouted. "Just listen to me. You can tell me I'm wrong later when we are not dead," Jack yelled. "I'll lower it from the other side. Belle," he turned to her, "I need you to make a sea anchor. Grab anything heavy you can, like a barrel or Fitzy's back, whatever. Something that will give us drag. Tie a rope to it firmly and feed it off the aft end. Got it?" "Aye, aye," she said, and ran off. Jack put his knife in his teeth and scurried up to the mast like a monkey, clinging tightly as the wind tried to push him off. He cut down the rigging as he went, allowing it and the sails to fall to the deck. At the very top, he grabbed the last remaining rope and used it to swing down, letting the slack out as he went. "Now, Fitz!" he yelled. Fitzwilliam did as he was told, hacking at the mast as if it were a tree. Standing on the pitching deck, Jack braced himself with the rope. When the long timber finally began to topple, he let the rope out, easing the mast down as best as he could. It still smashed a hole in the deck where it fell. Fitzwilliam barely leapt out of the way in time. "It's all done, Jack," Arabella shouted over the roar of the storm. "But why do we need to do that? Aren't we as good as dead now?" "We were top-heavy," Jack shouted back. "The wind was still catching at the mast, but that danger is past. Now, hold fast to the wheel." Two at a time they held the wheel to steady the ship, while the third went down below and bailed the water out using buckets. And still the storm beat down. After hours of wet miseries spent just keeping the Barnacle afloat, the clouds and the rain swept on. Within a few short minutes, it was as if there had never even been a storm at all. The sun shone, and the fish leapt out of the water. Jack's plan had worked. The Barnacle was upright, though it had definitely taken a beating. And then a tan and green line appeared on the blue horizon before them. "Land!" Jack shouted, looking through Fitzwilliam's glasses. "We must have been pushed here by the wind before we anchored, and we could not see anything through the storm." Let us heave to and look for water, Fitzwilliam said. Not, he added quickly to Arabella, who was wringing out her skirts, that the use of our fresh water didn't make for a great anchor. It was the only heavy barrel we had, she snapped, and you're free to drink the rainwater on deck, Master Dalton. Now, mates, Jack interrupted, let's get that mast back up and raise what sail we can. There's a good amount of rope below deck that could secure it, at least for now. All right, and that completes our two-chapter selection for this day. Make sure you guys tune in tomorrow, and we will continue on with chapter 5 and 6. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, all right? Bye-bye.